All right, we are sending this thing to paint, but there's some things missing, obviously. The front end of this car, this is the first time I've ever designed something from scratch. Like, we designed this whole front end, headlight buckets, everything, except for about this much of the fender, all from scratch. Made a lot of mistakes, had some success too, but now we've got to fix it. What we're gonna do today is make everything work. So one of the things that we had an issue with is this front fender. The driver's side front fender is actually too narrow. Something happened in the mold making process or in the installation process or whatever that made this thing about a ½ inch too narrow from, let's see, I marked it, from right here to right there. So the fender actually goes in, and the tire, if you bump out, it won't go up into the fender, it'll destroy it. It's gonna hit the fender. So we're gonna have to make that come out, so we'll get into that in this video. The front bumper doesn't actually have anything. I made some mounts for it, but it doesn't look very good, so we're going to solve our mounting issue with the front bumper to the bash bar, front bumper to the fender flares. I don't think we're gonna get in the hood in this video. I don't know, we'll see. I gotta get a hood, and I thought it was gonna be easy to find one, and it's not locally anyway. So we'll get to that. I've got a grill that we're gonna be modifying to fit in here. We have to finalize some body work on the spoiler, not much, just a little. And then we have to blend all the seams. So I decided we're gonna mold these fenders in. So that's the plan there. I'm not building side skirts right now. I'm gonna skip building side skirts because I like the way the side looks, so we gotta smooth that out a little bit as well. And I think that's pretty much it. It's a lot of fabrication, a lot of fiberglass work. I won't be talking much, so that's why I'm getting it out of the way now, and we're just gonna build. I'll explain if we need explaining, but mostly we're just gonna build. Let's do it. All right, so the first thing we're gonna do to make our bumper a little bit better, just in general, is create some structure. So I made this sheet of fiberglass. Very easy thing to do. You just get a flat surface, put some packing tape on it, and then lay your glass down. So the top obviously is a little bit rough. That's not that big of a deal because that won't be seen on the part. You'll see the bottom when we pull it off. It's gonna be very smooth. So we've got a very, very smooth finish here. We'll just cut this out, and that'll give us a piece of fiberglass that we can then use, bond, whatever. There we go. So cardboard to fiberglass. This is super strong. We're gonna hit this with sandpaper, then we'll prep the bumper, and we'll be ready to bond. So we're gonna be jumping around to a lot of different projects this time because everything that we do basically has a dry time associated with it, and we don't have a lot of time. So I had to do different things while stuff was drying. We have 8 different projects that had to get done in this video to meet the crazy deadline I set for myself. And the first one is this front fender. It's about 1 inch too narrow. I don't know how it happened, but it happened, and we've gotta fix it. So I just cut a line down the edge of the fender, kind of where that drop down is on the edge of the fender, and pushed it out with some foam. Now the foam worked okay, but I ended up using some paint sticks and rope to hold tension on the fender while I made this piece. Fiberglass doesn't stick to packing tape, as we saw earlier in the video, and so I'm building this section out of packing tape. I'm making it really large, really a lot larger than just the cut that I made, so that the transition from the fender out to its new home will be a lot smoother. If we just did the narrow strip that is missing, then we would have kind of a flat edge on the fender, and I didn't want that. I didn't want anyone to be able to tell that I had to widen this fender at all. The black glue that you keep seeing me use is called Panel Bond, and it's just a really great epoxy glue. Normally I would just use fiberglass filler to glue pieces like this together, but I had this stuff, and so I decided to use it while I had it. While we're waiting on the panel bond to dry, the bumper is now ready to go. So I'm using some fiberglass filler to blend the new pieces into the old piece. It's going to strengthen this bumper a lot. It gives us a mounting surface. It just solves a lot of problems that I had with this bumper early on. Then back over to the newly widened fender to smooth it out. So it's glued on now. It's not super strong around the edge because there's just a really small layer of glue there. So we're going to cover the entire thing with fiberglass filler, and we'll sand that back later, and we'll have a new piece. While that filler's drying, back to the bumper to fit it. And you can see this thing fits so much better. If you weren't here early on, I built this bumper out of paper and cardboard, and it wasn't the best design in the world, but I think this is going to work this time around. And now, since I've started modifying stuff, I decided to just fix every problem I have with the car. One of them being the other front fender. It's too wide in the front. We made this mold as a two-piece mold, and when it came out, it just didn't come out quite right. I thought I would just leave it the way it was, but I decided that while we're doing all this, while we're fixing all this other stuff, it just made sense to fix this too. So we cut a slit in it, used a paint stick to hold tension on it and push it inward, and then made a fiberglass panel. Back over to the front driver fender, and it's time to sand. Now when I'm doing this stuff, I take almost all this filler off, and to get a lot of it off quickly, a grinding wheel or a flat disc is the best tool. When you get to the final sanding stages, you'll see me use a hand sander and blocks and stuff like that, but in these first few, I'm just trying to knock the material down and get a smooth surface. Back to the passenger fender, and it's time to make this new piece part of the fender. You'll see this time I'm not using panel bond, just to show you guys that you can use fiberglass filler for this job. It just needs to be prepped well. So sand it a lot. This stuff will not stick to a smooth surface, period. So that's why I used the grinder to sand behind this piece so that we knew that it would stick and stay forever. I'm using self-tappers to screw everything in. It's a really easy hole to fix after it's all said and done, and it holds tension on the part so that when it does dry, nothing's going to release, nothing's going to move. Now I can take the self-tappers out, cover the whole thing in fiberglass filler. Again, most of this gets sanded right back off, but it just helps with your transitions. And since we fixed the front two fenders, I decided it was time to fix the rear. The rears have not been right since the beginning either. The front of them kind of tapers in, and while it looks very, very cool, it doesn't function very well. They touch the tires. I was going to have to pull the tires in to make this car drivable, and that was not okay. The other part of this is the rear is wide, so the rear fenders kind of sit at it like an angle, and the back looked really, really wide, and the front looked way too narrow, and I just didn't think the car was ever going to look exactly right from like a 3/4 view. So we're doing the exact same thing we did on the front, cutting a slit up the front half of both rear fenders and building a new lower section. I didn't realize how much wider it was going to have to be, and as you can see, we're basically rebuilding the bottom half of the front of the rear fenders, bottom half front of the rear fenders. And it was a huge, huge job. But again, this is just one of those things. We're trying to get this thing ready for paint. I want to be able to swap a Ford rear end into this thing, and the fenders were going to be the limiting factor there. So being able to widen these out just this little bit more is going to make it so that the Ford rear end goes in really easy, and we don't have to make any sort of modifications after. Now we're setting the bumper up, and you can see these fenders look a lot closer. They look a lot more symmetrical. The bumper lines up a lot more symmetrically with them. Everything just flows way better with the modifications we made. Now another modification I decided to make while doing all this other stuff is molding the fenders in. Originally I wasn't going to do this because fiberglass doesn't really like to bond to metal. When you go through a bunch of temperature changes, it can crack, it can separate. Eventually I just decided I didn't care. I thought it would look really good smooth, and my goal is to pull molds off these front and rear fenders later as kind of full pieces, all fiberglass. While the front fender seams are curing, we're going to go back to the rear fenders and install our pieces. Now this goes just like the front. We'll cut out a section that we think is going to work, and I think this is it, and then we're going to screw it in. We'll bond it with panel bond. When it dries, we'll be able to fill and sand and fill and sand and fill and sand and fill. and sand some more and end up with a smooth transition and a smooth fender. Already I can tell that this is going to work. It looks so much better. The tire is actually going to go up into the fender, and that means that we can actually drive the car with the wheels at this width, which is super, super wide. I realized after building that section that it didn't make sense like how the fender got back to the car. There was no like underturning piece or rounded edge like there was before, so I decided to go ahead and make that as well. Again, another huge job, but I knew this was going to bother me if it was just a flat cut across the bottom of the fender. So I actually took a piece out from the old fender and glued it in with fiberglass. Maybe glue is not the right term, but you know what I mean. And then grafted all of that over. Grafted, that's the term we want to use. I grafted that into the new piece that I made as well, so that it's all one piece now, and it's a smooth transition, and it just looks awesome. Next big project for this week is the hood. The hood doesn't go because our engine's too big, and that's an awesome problem to have. I did plan for this. I've got a filter for it. I've got everything that we need to make this look really cool. But what I don't have is a hood. This hood is scrap. I mean, it's awful, and we're just going to use it for testing, and hopefully I can find a hood before this thing has to get painted. And now we need a grill. Hadn't planned on doing this, but hey, we're in it, so we might as well. This grill is too big, like most things are. Well, actually, it needs to be smaller, which is weird for this car. Everything else is big. So we had to take 2 inches out of it, had to section the middle to try to get it to fit. Now, I did learn a lot of lessons here. I thought this was weldable material, and well, you'll find out later that it's not. We still made it work. And as you can see, it looks like it's going to fit pretty well in our opening. We might have to do some adjustments, but I think it's going to work. When I realized welding wasn't going to work, I decided to use some JB Weld. I reinforced it with fiber and let that dry. Now, while that's dry, I'm going to move to another job that we have on the car this week, and that is our custom air filter. I really hate the way the HEI distributor looks on the front of the engine. It's huge, and it distracts you from all the other cool stuff going on. So I want to cover it up, and there's no real way to do that. So I'm taking the air filter that I bought, which is kind of an oval style, and we're going to make a custom housing for it, I guess, custom air filter, making custom everything, so that we can use it as a cover, as an engine cover, and kind of as the centerpiece for our hood. You'll see what I mean in just a minute. Luckily, this was made out of steel, so I could weld it. And now we need a custom air filter. Didn't know this was a thing. I don't know if it is, but we made it one. I just cut it down with the angle grinder. I did take a measurement before doing this, sort of, and decided to glue it back together. CA glue has become my best friend, and that's what we used here, aka super glue. It's just great, especially for stuff like this. Got a lot of different materials I needed to bond. Put them together, and they are just there forever. Forever. And it fits like a charm, but it looks kind of weird. You'll see why in just a second. And there you go. Our cover is complete. So it looks like a big oval filter when the hood is down, and when the hood's up for that matter. And it covers up this big, ugly, in my opinion, ugly distributor. Now, we might have to make some sort of cover or something to cover the front of the distributor up so you don't see it when the hood is down, but I think this looks much, much better. And I cannot wait to see this thing sticking out of the hood and shaking while the car is idling or going down the road. Alright, enough celebrating, back to work. The back fenders are dry, so it's time to shape them up, smooth them out, and hopefully come up with something good. This is a rinse and repeat thing here, more filler. Again, if you're freaking out because there's so much filler, it's gonna get sanded away. You'll see when I wash the car later. While that's drying, we'll switch back to the grill, and we find out that it's probably not gonna work. I'm gonna go ahead and shape it up and just see if I can get it to work. So I'm really proud of this piece. It came out so cool, but I don't know if it's going to. Now that that's done, we're back to the rear fenders. We're gonna sand everything down and work on molding these in as well. Just like the fronts, eventually I want to mold the entire quarter panel out of fiberglass so that we can remove all this and put a fiberglass piece on top. I just think it'll be so cool. I think it'll be a lot lighter, and it'll be cool to be able to reproduce. These things took more sanding than I could have ever imagined. There was just so much work to produce this part out of nothing, and that's just it. There was so much work. So a lot of filler, a lot of sanding, a lot of filler, a lot of sanding, and in the middle of all of that, I went back to trying to make this grill fit the car. After looking at the grill and realizing it's probably not going to work with our hood or anything for that matter, I decided to take a break from that and go back to sanding. Now this thing is actually shaping up pretty well. I've moved to hand sanding, and that's kind of my flow. Angle grinder, palm sander, orbital sander, and then hand sand. The black stuff I'm spraying on is called guide coat. It just shows you where your low spots are. It helps you confirm what you're feeling basically. And so it kind of let me know where I needed to add a little bit more filler and what I needed to do to get this thing to look really good. Now the front actually didn't come out as great as I had hoped. There was still kind of a curve in it at the front end, so I pulled that out, put some filler in. I don't think I filmed this. I put it on my Instagram, but this is just me sanding and sanding some more, trying to get everything to flatten out some, and it actually came out pretty good. That's enough fast sanding. How about some slow sanding? Shout out to Eric for the sanding shots. So here I'm just showing kind of what I fixed. It did have a huge wave in it, and now it doesn't. You can see it's still a little curvy on that edge. That'll all get fixed in bodywork. I left the filler a little bit thick there just so we can block that edge down and make sure it's flat and straight. All right, so we made these little angle brackets. You can see they're just like the ones I made for the diffuser. And it's just an angle that I squished down, drilled a hole through. Cars here, dude. Awful. I promise when we buy a shop, the road will be quieter. We squished this down, we put a hole through it. Now it goes in right here and bolts down to the bolt that we just put in. What we'll do is we'll tack these, just stick the welder through here and tack there, and then tack the one in here as well. Then we can pull the bolts out, we can take the spoiler off and finish weld those, and then we'll have two mounts for the spoiler on the bottom, and then we'll have to make two mounts. I'm gonna do two down here and then two up top, and the spoiler will be officially mounted for the first time ever. Really, really stoked about it. See, this is all one piece. It feels really solid. We lift it up. And because we added fiberglass, these springs are not like good enough for this anymore. So we'll have to put some sort of assist in there. But you can see this is super sturdy, even with just 4 mounting points. So with that, we're mounted. All right, so with our modifications from earlier in the video, this thing actually fits way better than it ever has. And that's good, because I was a little bit worried. And because of that, it fits our bash bar really well. So I'm just going to run self-tappers into it for now. That'll be what mounts our bumper. But what we'll end up doing is putting rib nuts in the actual bash bar, and then we'll be able to screw it in and screw it out, and it'll be fine. There'll be threads there. I don't have my rib nut gun today. I've got to get a new one, so we'll do that later. For now, it's just going to be self-tappers, and that'll just be good enough. That's going to hold it where we need to be able to move forward. So. Alright, so I'm just going to rinse the dust off this thing. It is getting insanely dusty in the shop, and I just needed some cleanness. I need some cleanliness in my life. So we decided to clean this up, get it looking better, I guess, and move on to the things that are keeping me from being able to load it up and drive it eventually. The steering's disconnected. It's been disconnected since I put the engine in. I had a hard time getting it reconnected. I just gave up on it, honestly. So I decided to go back into this. We have to have steering to put this thing on the trailer. And it really wasn't that hard. Turns out I've been procrastinating for no reason. With that connected, we can put the car back on the ground. It looks sick on the ground. It's a little bit lower than normal right now because the back is still up in the air. And just tighten everything up, make sure everything's bolted on and good to go. On the rear, we've still got to trim out some of the fiberglass, so we'll lift the rear up in the air after taking some pictures for Instagram. Just going to bask in success for a little bit and back to work. I'm trimming out some of the excess that's not needed anymore now that we've got this new piece that we built. Not a big deal. I don't even know if it's going to be an issue, but I just didn't want to have any sort of contact when we did start driving the car. And seeing this thing back on the actual ground again is one of the best things I've seen in a long, long time. I'm so excited to get it out of the shop and into the sunlight and just see what it looks like out of this dusty, nasty shop. Getting this car loaded up on a trailer is a little bit of a process. It's not that bad, but you have to pull the front bumper off. It just will not go up on the trailer with the bumper on, which is only like 4 bolts, so it's not that big of a deal. But I'm also not going to have the diffuser painted or any of the trim stuff that I'm using. It's all just going to stay at the shop. So I took all that stuff off. I did some welding because I missed a few spots and loaded this thing up on the winch. Luckily, I had Kyle and Jackson there to help me, as well as my oldest son. And we got this thing up there, strapped down. It was super easy. Ignore the cars in the background. They may be future projects. They may be somebody else's projects. I'm not going to tell you, and you don't know. You can speculate. With the car strapped, it is time to head to the shop. the other shop, somebody else's shop that's going to do their own work on the car, and it's going to be great. I never thought this day would come. It's loaded up, it's going to paint. We're 4 days behind, but I can't believe we even did it. So much sanding. Let's take it. Now I have some video that Jackson took. That's the kid with the mullet fade in there in the background. But I didn't get it for this video, so I'll post it on my Instagram. If you want to see this thing rolling down the road behind the Titan, then go check out Instagram. I'll post those as soon as I get them. So we're just going to fast forward to Cam's shop, and this is where the car is going to spend its life for the next few weeks. The next time you guys see it and the next time that I see it, it's going to be a really cool color. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. I know it was kind of crazy. It was crazy for me. This is the most work I've done in a video in a really long time, and it made it honestly a little bit difficult to edit and a little bit difficult to keep up with. But we're here. The car is in the paint shop. It's getting body worked, and I could not be more excited. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you in the next one, which will not be an MGB video. We're going to roll into a different build. I've been planning for this, and we'll have a build to kind of make up the gap while the MG is getting painted. See you later.